So this article is coming out because it's the anniversary of the 1992 LA riots, or the 92 LA riots. And I'm going to read this article, but I'm going to tell you that I was here when it happened. And I'm a LA, what you would call an LA native, um, or a LA County native. So 30 years after the LA riot, distrust remains between the Asian and Black communities, so it has gotten better. Has it gotten better? It has not gotten better. So this is by Joel Huerto, and so he's the editor, and he's probably a journalist that's only writing some of the findings of what has happened years later, and then I'll give you my feedback because I'm still in the area of LA County, so I can tell you, if any of this is true. So 30 years ago, after 3 relentless days of rioting in South Central Los Angeles, following acquittals of 4 police officers caught on video beating black motorist Rodney King with their nightsticks following a car chase. Rodney King, who was shaken, issued an impassioned plea. Please, I just want to say, can we all just get along? This is what he asked, and his voice was quivering. So by then, Rodney King, who suffered multiple injuries, including a fractured skull, broken bones, and damage to his internal organs from the beating, had become a nationwide symbol of police brutality. So the acquittals of the officers, 3 of them were white, ignited a vitriolic response from some of the black Angelenos in South Central Los Angeles that also targeted another ethnic group, Korean Americans, and many who had their neighborhood stores looted or burned to the ground. And so there's a still photo here of one of the storefronts during that period. And so after nearly 2 days of fires, civil disturbance or civil unrest, a merchant looks over the remains of a real retail center in LA. So if the trial goes back to the article, and the verdict proved an agonizing event for the black community, the riots that began April the 29th of 1992 were equally so for Korean Americans. So to this day, they use the word Saligu, which translate in Korean to the 4/29, the date of the violence that it had erupted. And so a shorthand similar to 9/11, of course. And so symbolizing unspeakable trauma. So if there is a single collective memory among Korean Americans who lived through these riots, it may be of those in the community who took it upon themselves to guard stores against the looters, while the LAPD seemed to cede control of the neighborhood to the rioters. So some were armed with handguns, and then some with rifles, and they climbed on top of rooftops, and they scanned the area for potential trouble. So a surreal image that was played on television screens across the country and seemed to signal the beginning of a race war. So by that time, the police did move in to reestablish the order. So the neighborhood lay in ruins. So 65% of the businesses that had been ransacked, looted, destroyed were owned by Koreans. who incurred 40% of roughly 1 billion in property damage that tallied in the rally, the that tallied in the riot. And so the racial strife between Korean and black communities was that laid bare in the riots was not an isolated event as well. So the uneasy relationship rapidly deteriorated after the killing of Latasha Harlins, who was a 15-year-old black girl who was shot in the back of the head by a Korean store owner at a convenience store. Her name was Soon Ja Do in 1991 over allegation of shoplifting. So Do accused Harland of trying to steal. It was orange juice that was $1.79. So I was here when that happened as well. So police later determined otherwise, noting that Harland had $2 in her hand and had at the time she was killed. So so you can still see a still photo of Korean men that stand on their roof in the LA grocery store with rifles to prevent looters from entering the store. And so Doo's son testified at the trial that prior to the shooting, shoplifting incidents at the store occurred approximately 40 times per week. So gang members had threatened his life. People had often threatened to burn the business down. So a jury found Doo, then 51 at the time, guilty of manslaughter. So the judge in the case, who's reasoned that Doo acted out of fear due to previous robberies at the store, sentenced her to 5 years probation instead, with no jail time. So Harlan's death and the light sentence handed down to the store owner enraged the black community. So it still hurts Latasha's cousins. Shanice Harlan's Kilgore told NBC News. This was in 2021. So while 3 decades have passed since the Rodney King beating, is what we call it, made his impassioned plea to the communities that were affected by the 92 riots are still figuring out how to get along. So the tension between Korean store owners and black customers is far from resolved, and an atmosphere of distrust continues to hover like a cloud. So how much distrust compared to with that expressed during the riots? And so one community leader believes it's worse than most people understand. So I will, now that I've gotten this far in the article, I will say that a lot of this is true. A lot of it is true. So it's still not any better than what it was back when this riot had began. So I will say that, unfortunately. And what also I will say that a lot of these incidences are not isolated incidences. They are incidences in terms of the police pulling over black motorists and the harassment. It seems to be targeted incidences. And so more bringing it to 2022, since back then, it's just now you have new people that are experiencing some of the same issues that happened back in 1992 or before the LA riot. And you have new situations, but they're the same old issues. So I'd say 80%, going back to the article, I would give it an 8 out of a 10. It has not gotten better. I would have to agree, actually more. I say 90% it hasn't gotten better. So the Reverend Mark Whitlock, senior pastor at Reed Temple AME Church, told Yahoo News. And so before becoming a full pastor of a predominantly black congregation in Maryland, Whitlock served as an executive director of Fame Renaissance and economic arms of First AME Church in LA, which raised more than about $400 million in grants and loans that was created at 4,000 jobs in South Central LA before the Rodney King became the household name. And so this was Rodney King when he was making that impassioned speech about can we all just get along during that 92 rioting incident. So Rodney King, he makes the plea for an end to the violence at an LA news conference. This was May 1st in 1991, or 1992, I'm sorry about that. So this was him when he was still living. He's no longer alive. But the Reverend Najuma Smith Pollard, a Southern California native, which I am as well, um, and assistant director at USC Center of Religion and Civic Culture, was also a member of the First AME Church in LA and when the 1992 riots had unfolded. And so April the 8th of this year, she spoke at an interfaith prayer breakfast held at Wilshire United Methodist Church in LA, recalling the conflicting emotions of driving through the unrest 3 decades ago. And so I was between faith and fear in a very dynamic way. You might can see pictures, glimpses of the incident of back, when Natasha Hollins was still alive. The incident, I think they show it to my right. Um, you can't hear what they're saying, but I think that's Natasha Holland's sister. And then you can see parts of LA, and you might see some clips of people, like a news person speaking to somebody, and in the stores where some of the incidences had happened. So yeah, it brings back some really not great memories. But it says that this person who's speaking here said that they were between faith and fear in a very dynamic way. Smith Pollard said as she was adding, and it said, I wasn't afraid of my people, but I was afraid of what the future might look like if we don't fix things. So part of the monolith, our monologue campaign to revisit the ugly chapter in LA history and to promote the South LA intersection of Florence and Normandy, the site where the violence had exploded, a stumbling block to the goal. However, is that the black community in places like South Los Angeles or South Central has yet to see tangible economic gains, Whitlock said. So I live in South LA and I've seen where there are places that look like it has been like closed off. It's not really operational, like boarded up businesses, and a lot of the opportunities that were or once were for, if there were ever any, for black people, you don't really see very many black owned businesses. It's usually people that are not from the area that are opening up businesses or buying property, buying houses, things like that, and then turning them into uh, rental property, and it's usually overpriced and in a community where people are struggling. And so that remains to be true, and it has not gotten any better. It's gotten actually a lot worse than since this all these incidents that have happened. And so it says, I think people are concerned about our economy, which is basically what I said. He said they're concerned about world wars because that's what's going on right now. Sort of like, well, there's a war that is going on between Russia and Ukraine. So they're concerned about the gas prices. That's what's happening now. And so, more than that, they're concerned about their safety as well because there's an uptick in the violence. So, and robberies and home invasions. And so, unless we begin to deal with that in a transparent way, the unrest which took place in 1992 could very easily take place once again, which I believe it will. If you have larger numbers of people that are becoming homeless, that is an issue that is happening and it's growing in rapid speed. overall black people in the US have made economic and health gains, but they've slipped further behind whites in terms of the education and social justice issues. According to this year's Equality Index released by the National Urban League, and the median household income for black people is 43,862, 37% less than whites, which is 69,823. And so this was a storefront. It looks familiar. I think I've seen it, as a matter of fact, before. But this was merchandise that was being looted, or they say looted, but it was being taken, merchandise from a shopping center in LA. Now, uh, what had ended up happening during that time, during the riots, there was so much that was going on, and so many people and they were going through so much pain and so much frustration about seeing what happened to Rodney King. It was sending a really horrible message to the black community that you don't matter, and this is what will happen to you, and your rights, you have no rights. Your rights don't count if you have any, and you have no rights. And we can do what we want. We can even almost kill you under the guise of the law, and we can also be supported and acquitted in the court of law. So that is the message that it was sending, and so it reverberated around the community. So it sent shockwaves, and then we've had other people of other backgrounds in those communities that have also had experienced police brutality, and so a lot of it had been uh, uh, racial profiling that had been going on, where there were numerous people that were pulled over by the police, or pulled over by police on bogus traffic stops, and then they were harassed or they were beaten. And so that particular incident that happened in during that time, Rodney King, he was videotaped by somebody that was close in the area and happened to see what was going on. And so that was just one incident that was caught on tape. And so there have been many people that have had some run-ins with law enforcement that didn't end very well, where it wasn't caught on tape, and it was very similar to what Rodney King, and now what we've had more in our time of this decade, is the George Floyd incident, was yet again sent another shockwave across America. Um, it was like a horrible, another horrible message that was sent, which was even worse. Now you not only have this person that's beaten, but this person is killed right, right in front of everybody's eyes, where they can see he was murdered. And so that is the reason why it has not gotten any better. We're seeing these things constantly happening, and it's happening to, usually when you see those type of events, they're happening to, mostly you'll see it happening to black people in these communities, and then you also see it happening to the Hispanic people, where when you see it, if you catch it on tape, um, you know, then it sends a message across everywhere, letting people know that, you have no rights, that you don't matter. And so this is what people were reacting off of, out of the frustration and anger. And then you have these businesses that they want to charge you a lot of money for all these products in your community, where you're struggling and you can't get hired by these people. They seem to come and open up businesses, and they seem to do pretty well off of your dollar, or making money off of you while you're struggling, and you don't know if you're going to have a place to sleep or food to eat. And so that is how the people, and I'm just saying that is how the people of the community felt. That is at least one of the reasons why you see the horrible events seem to repeat themselves. And so, but the flip side of it is you have an Asian community who maybe they are looking at it from another lens where they say, well, we're struggling shopkeepers. We're not extremely rich, but we're not, we're not people that don't work either. And so we have to be there every day to keep our businesses afloat, and we're hard workers and we're doing what we can to feed our families. And so when you come and take from us, then that's our whole life savings, or that's our whole business. And that was what we used to put our kids through college. And so I get that. And so you have all of these people who are in a demographic, they have different some different sets of experience and then some similar sets of experiences, but all in the end it's like you have all these groups kind of from different issues, but they all come together and you find out that everybody's struggling in some kind of way. But what hurts is the social divide of these communities. They're yet so close, but yet so far away. So for Asian Americans, the trajectory isn't wholly upward either. So it's going into that. So 2018, the Pew Research Center analysis indicated that income inequality in the U.S. was greatest among the Asians, displacing blacks as the most economically divided ethnic group. And so the gap in the standard of living between Asians near the top of those at the bottom of the income ladder nearly doubled between 1970 to 2016, and the distribution of income among Asians went from being one of the most equal to being the most unequal. So while Asians overall ranked as the highest earning racial and ethnic group in the US, it is not a status shared by all Asians. So, they had this show called Crazy Rich Asians. I think that's what it's called, Crazy Rich Asians. Then some people seem to get this in their head that all Asian people have a lot of money, but that's not all Asian people. Um, believe it or not, there are Asian people that are not living high on the hog. They're not crazy rich and they're struggling, or they have to work like every freaking day, and that's not easy because you have to always sacrifice your sleep, and if you're sick, no, you got to go to work to keep that business open. There's a lot of things, or you could lose money, or if you get fined, maybe you're not doing something, and you have to make sure that that business is in order. If it's not in order, then they figure out a way to like close your business down. That's a worry every day. So you can be up today and down tomorrow, or have your whole business closed. That's your whole life, maybe your income. And so, to be sure, though, the LA riots exposed simmering racial tensions as well. So then 2020 coronavirus pandemic that hit. And so once again, it brought them to the forefront. So thousands of Asian Americans nationwide reported verbal and physical attacks over the last 2 years. And so there were 10,905 reported hate incidences against American, Asian, and Pacific Islanders from March 2020 to December 2021. So according to the Stop AAPI Hate campaign, the majority of the incidences involved verbal harassment at 63%, and almost half of 48.7% took place in public spaces. More hate incidences were reported 2021, 6,273, than in 2020, and 4,632 incidences. That was in 2020. So violent hate crime soared in LA and other major cities in the past year, according to the LAPD. Citywide robberies up to 44%, and in 2022 compared with last year's 57% compared with 2020. So what was the most concerning was the increase of the levels of violence and the frequent use of firearms connected to those crimes. This is what LAPD Chief Michael Morris said. So you see a lot of these businesses, and this is a real iconic photo, a still photo of what was going on back then in the LA riots. And I remember seeing all of this. I was there when all of this was happening, and I felt like we were in a war-torn country. I felt like how the people that you hear talking about war, how it just like in a split second, everything, your whole life has changed. Foreseeing all of this violence, people getting shot in the street, people getting arrested, and you see piles of people with they have these zip bands on their arms because they're waiting to put them in a truck. A lot of those people, they let them go, of course, for like minor, like disturbing the peace or whatever. They couldn't, too much backlog, there's too many people to arrest, but also people got killed, people got hurt, people got in car accidents, people were just taking what they could because they didn't have anything else. And some of that, what they call looting, was out of fear because people knew that things would be shut down because there were roads that were being closed, buses were closed off, nobody could ride the bus anywhere, people were worrying about not having food to eat because they knew that it was a martial law that was coming into effect. And then they started that. They had soldiers that came in to bring back the order, the social order of LA, when this event had occurred, the riots. And so in January, the violent encounter at the liquor store in Long Beach, about 20 miles south LA, awkward. It was it awakened more painful memories, of course. So a 65-year-old Asian store owner, Ji Lee, was stabbed in the neck by this black man. And so according to the Long Beach police, paralyzing her for about the neck down, um, from the neck down, and robbing her of the ability to speak as well. So the incident like this have kept some of the Korean community on edge, and the memory of Rodney King riots very fresh. And so the MBA student of the University of Southern California at the time of the riots, Haypen, told Yahoo News that she remembered thinking of herself, why aren't other communities feeling the same pain? So I saw the community kicked down and crying a lot. I'm said. So now the president and founder of the nonprofit Faith and Community Empowered, a national group serving the Asian American community, has made her mission to heal the divide. And so in 2021, she launched a campaign called Serve, Advocate, and Advocate and Inspire, Give, and Unite. And so it's SAIGU. It's a commemorate of the anniversary of the LA riots. So this month, the campaign is sponsoring a series of events seeking to help the Korean community reassess and the lesson from the 92 riots and the use of them as a catalyst to combat myths and to create the open dialogue with other minority groups as well. So I think it's unfortunate that, being humans, many times we tell myths about one another. I'm said. So when we can have honest conversation that open eyes and open hearts, then I think that's when the true solidarity can happen. And so you see, not everybody was on board with what was going on, and they were overwhelmed. I was one of them. When I saw this, it just felt like everything was going to come to a screeching halt. Um, they stopped the mail, they stopped the public transportation in these areas, and I believe, too, recall police officers said that they would rather people take, some of them were like, we rather you take these items because they're going to burn the stores to the ground. And so I remember hearing that. It was very scary. And so a business owner, he himself is a business owner, this black man, he watches the store of his own business burn down. This was April 30th, 1992. And so these are the stories that probably people don't even see as well, that there were black business owners, maybe not as many that you would think, but there were black business owners who also lost their businesses as well. So I'm disputes the claims made by some in the Black and Latin communities that Asian store owners receive special treatment on government loans. And that was said. I remember hearing some people saying that when purchasing a business, that Korean Americans are guilty of the predatory attitude that they open stores in neighborhoods like South Central. And so many Asian store owners are earning less than 3,000 per month. And so she pointed this out as some that divided among their employees. As a result, many store owners, they say that they turn to their family labor rather than hiring from the greater community because they are simply unable to afford to do otherwise. And so that's the other issue. And so I'm going to speak on this. A lot of black people would try to go in to get jobs, and they would experience this: we don't hire, we're not hiring. And so a lot of people had a lot of mixed emotions about that. It felt like it was a racial thing that they didn't want to hire black people, and a lot of times you will see what they would hire Latin, maybe one or two Latin guys or some Latin people would be working in the store, but there wouldn't be any black people working in the store in the community, especially beauty supply shops where you see black women frequent and they buy hair products like every week, every day, every hour. Um, that business is always booming, but you see only like maybe people from another background other than black women themselves working in there. That has kind of changed. I have seen beauty supply shops that do have black women working there. Um, and they have Latin women working there, who know about hair products and things like that. And so um, I've seen some changes, some small changes, some slight changes in some things, but not everything has completely changed. There's been new things, new incidences of police brutality and other things that have happened over a course of since the 30 years of the 92 riots. So a 2022 report published in UCLA showed that thousands of low-income Asian American households in California also struggle to obtain funding to keep their business afloat. And it was just basically what I was saying, that it's hard to own a business. You have to be there every day, and then hiring people, you also gotta follow the rules. They gotta have lunches and breaks, and you gotta do everything according because you can get sued. You also have to make sure you pay those people. And so if you have enough in your budget to pay people that you employ, then you can do that. But if you don't, then that's why you see sometimes they will hire people that are family members, and that's not always easy because now they're on the hook. They have to come to work every day, and they have to not let their family members down, and then they're trying to keep the business afloat so that they can have whatever it is that they do have. So I'm trying to play devil's advocate here. So it goes on to say that the report found that 11% of the Asian American who applied for government aid received it. And so the rate of rent relief for Asian Americans was half of what the data showed for white households, and 21%, and the black households 20%. So there are many platforms where our communities do get along, but I think in the area of store owners and customers, that this one, where I think there's a narrative that these store owners are exploiting, profiteering, stealing the community's wealth, I'm said. And so those were things that floated around back in the 92, because, these are people of poverty. And so the looting is not, if you look past all of that, just saying, oh, they're looting, you have to look at the backstory of the cities and the neighborhoods and what their struggles, their economic struggles are, and what was going on during those times. And also look at the other flip side of it, what Asian people, what their struggle might be being a store owner or shopkeeper in the communities. And then you're having to hire only your family members. You try to, you're on a limited income, or your business, your whole life is surrounded by that business. And so, and then you're in an area around people who don't know you. You speak another language, they speak another language. You're from another culture, they're from another culture. You coming into their community is poverty, and then you trying to build upon a community of poverty. How that dynamic turns out. And so I'm just saying that's what happens when you have other people of backgrounds that are struggling in different ways, but they don't know enough about the backstory of one another to understand and have empathy for each other's struggles. And so it can turn into a lot of mixed emotions and feelings where people don't understand one another because they just haven't learned the backstory of each other's history or whatever their life is like, going through whatever it is that they're going through, or putting themselves in the shoes of those individuals. And that's the thing. It's like misrepresentation of uh, who people are. And so to assume that all black people steal, I have to put that in there. That's the assumption when you have these bad experiences with a few people, and then you paint the picture all straight across the board with a broad brush that all of these groups of people that look like that person that came to your store and stole something doesn't mean the whole race steals. That's the other thing. So we have to be mindful of all of that as well. So those are also misrepresentations of people, because there are black people that are owners. There's black people that are trying to be homeowners, that have gone to college, that have made contributions to from I don't know how long ago. And they also struggle, and a lot of times we are met with a lot of animosity, hatred, and racism. And so going through if our history background and looking at what's happened thus far up to now, George Floyd, all of these things, even the Rodney King, you keep seeing these things play out. That tells you how people are feeling, about how we're being treated as well. So, uh, and you're coming to our communities to build your wealth in a community where people are are limited of wealth. So you have to look at that, from both sides of the angle. So I'm co-moderated the Unity Prayer Breakfast at the Wilshire's United Methodist Church that brought together advocates and community leaders, including Whitlock, who collaborated with I'm on an opinion piece published online 2021, so in which he explained how the black community should support the idea that Asian lives also matter. And so um, once he learned about the challenges facing Korean community, it opened his eyes. And so it made him that the biggest hurdle, um, realized the biggest hurdles in bringing the two communities together, that was increasing in awareness of what the other had been through. And so we are one spoken in the wheel of life. One spoke in the wheel of life, Whitlock said. And so it's time for us to see the rest of the spokes. So, because if we don't, we will never roll together. And that's a good way, or a good euphemism way of putting it. And if we don't roll together, we will perish together. Exactly. And so it's just about understanding each other and not having all this pent up animosity towards people, simply based on the fact that you don't know their backstory, who they are, their culture, and you don't understand each other's struggles. Being as those that you are different people of a different background, but you're in the end you are similar. You're both human, you both bleed, you have feelings, you have struggles, and so that is what makes you very much the same. In that sense, you have similarities, and you have a lot more similarities than differences, believe it or not. So it's just sad that also I feel too that the media, and I have to add this in here and include it, when you see pictures like this, it kind of shows you how the media will play out in these incidences, and it kind of pits people against one another. And I've kind of felt like cultures that have come into black communities a lot of times, sometimes they will tell other people different things, or they will make up stories or make up racial stereotypes about cultures. And when these people come to the communities, they've already have these formed opinions about these people. And so when you hear, oh, they steal or they don't have any money, and then it's referring to black people, they don't read, they don't learn about what happened before those people to make those people like what you're hearing. Who's saying these things to you, and is it all true? And so you have to ask yourself those questions before you start assuming that these things are true. That, oh, these people steal, they don't have any money. Um, okay, if they don't have any money, why is it that they don't have any money? There must have been a reason for it. You ask yourself these questions, and now you have to look at everybody, because homelessness is growing. That is the big issue, and you can see homeless people from all walks of life, all backgrounds, and all cultures. So why is it that those people don't have any money? So now ask yourself that question. So that's what's happening right now. You see all these people, white, black, Hispanic, Chinese. You see all these people that are from different backgrounds here in LA County, and it's growing. The homeless populations are growing, and they got different colors of faces that are homeless, different um, makeups of people. You used to think it was just single people that, or it's just that's just a bum. Now you're seeing families that are homeless. Then you got different levels of homelessness now. You got people living in RVs, people living in motels, part time, living in a tent, people that are living in hotels, people that are living like between places, or they live in house to house, or they live in person to person, like friend to friend, or they doubled up with people. And why is this? And these are people that are not only black, they're white, they're women, they're children, they're Hispanic, Mexican, Asian, Korean, whatever you want to call. They're all different types of people now that you're seeing that are, you notice, oh, this person is out there, they're homeless, you know. And so now things are starting to shift. And so you're seeing too that police violence is not only limited to just black people. Also, we're seeing that is happening to the Hispanic communities. You're seeing that they used to think that, oh, the Hispanic communities, they have all of downtown businesses. They have all this and all that. They're shopkeepers, or their mom and pop stores. Some of their communities are being gentrified. Well, most of them are. Boyle Heights, in East LA, there's communities, hipsters taking over, and then if the hipsters they move out, then you got these luxury apartments, which you see a lot of the Hispanic population that used to live in some areas. You're seeing they're trying to figure out where they're going to move to. You know, their income is not enough now. So the stories are shifting. So I just wanted to add that in there to what's happening right now. We're seeing a lot of faces now that it just doesn't look like how it used to look before. It's like, oh, it's the black people don't have any. Now you see it's the poor people that don't have any money. And that could be from any background. If you don't make the money, then you ain't got no place to live. So that's the way, or if you don't make enough, and they got it where some of these places where having a house or having a place to stay is a luxury now. Think about it, luxury living, luxury apartments. It's a luxury. It's not a right. And so that's the big problem that we're dealing with. And it's happening not only in LA County, it's happening in a lot of cities where you find people that are in between income, in between jobs, or they're having to work more than one job. They don't sleep. They're having to work gig jobs. They're having to work side hustles. just to have a place to lay your head. And so it has gotten to that point. And so, yeah, there is still distrust, but that was because you still have this animosity between different cultures because nobody's knowing who to trust now because of all of the things that have happened from way back when to up to now. But now it's not just so much just the race of it, it's economics seem to be a big factor in all of this. Is like who's pulling the strings that one group can get to the top, and then all of a sudden now this group you thought was at the top, you're learning they're not really at the top anymore. Nobody's at the top. And so that's what's going on. It's like now you're seeing a lot of faces of homeless people, and they don't all look the same. And so that's where we're at.